Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Right, before I go any further, I must let you all know that I am currently being held hostage at gunpoint by crazed Danny Moonstar fans. My worst fears have come true. They have actually found out where I live and they demand justice for Danny. Therefore, as of right now, Danny Moonstar is obviously the best champion of the year. And I apologize deeply for everything hurtful that I said about Danny. And I will do better. I see the error in my ways, and I am truly sorry. Right. That put aside, uh, obviously, obviously, these videos are my own personal opinion with the mixture of game, current trends, and relevance. If you have different opinions, please do not feel unnecessarily agitated. I already have had comments of like unsubscribed because of Danny or whatever else placements, and it happens every year, and you can't escape it. But no matter what I say, people are gonna react the way they do. At the same time, I love making these videos because I love having these discussions with people who are not, used to eating crayons and sniffing glue whilst in kindergarten and growing up, and probably do so up until this current day, living outside of their mother's basements. But still, there is good time and good fun to be had with these videos. So please do take them that way. This is meant to have a nice, healthy, positive discussion about our favorite champions, our least favorite champions, what these champions lack, what we would want to see improved in them, and so on and so forth. And ultimately, I'm just an idiot online expressing my opinion. Everybody can do that these days. If you disagree with mine, go make your YouTube channel and do so yourself and see how you do. Right. So, December ranking series is always a very special time, and the first part we already did. We ranked the worst champions of 2023. And in case of 2023, to be honest, I think we only have had like 2 bad champions, and all of the other champions are varying degrees of good or awesome or amazing or insane. And therefore, needless to say, in today's video, which is the second video in the series, best 2023 champions, every single champion that I'm mentioning is going to be, at the very least, very solid, very good. Some of these rankings will change from time to time, as does our perception of these champions. Some of them are very new to the game and we don't know that much about them. Some of them we have had for a while and we have had time to learn and practice and test them and experience them. So again, all of these rankings are subject to change pending future content releases, pending future performance of them. So let's get to the nitty-gritty bit of the situation. Again, before we get to the nitty-gritty grit, I guess I need to remind you, what did my worst champions of the year look like? And we finished with Vision at spot number 12. Werewolf by Night, I suspect is going to go higher very, very soon. I again explained his placement there just because I think he came into the game at a very unfortunate time for him. And the rest you can see on the list. One champion that I did not mention, and one champion that I did not talk about, but perhaps I should have, would be New Iron Man. And I did not include him in the list. He's not included in the rankings, but by all intents and purposes, he is a brand new champion. He should be included in the rankings, and that was error of my part. Now, if I had the ability to go back in time and make this a list of 23 champions in his placement, he would end up somewhere in the middle. Therefore, I find it appropriate to talk about it about right now, because he would end up somewhere in the spots from, let's say, 9 to 13, something like that. I do think he's very, very solid. I do think that there are some inherent weaknesses with him as well. But ultimately, I feel like Obama did a good job. He feels like an Iron Man. He is a viable character right now. People have been using him. You see him here and there in the Battlegrounds decks. He answers some less than standard problems as well. He's supercharged against mutants with prowesses. He does well some additional fights like Killmongers because of his armor breaks. Super tanky. His awakened ability is like massive for defense. So if you have ranked up a 6-star, he can be a very, very tanky defender. Because of his massive armor rating and like crit resistance and everything else, he can, really stall you on defense as well. So ultimately, I do feel like they have done a successful job with this Iron Man release. And I genuinely did want to acknowledge that. He's not necessarily, again, the best champion of the year by any means. He's definitely not the worst, so I feel like somewhere in the middle spots is where he would belong. It, takes a bit of learning how to use him as well, or at the very least, the ability to parry special attack hits. That's quite important. And he kind of has a reach, which is quite important because he's not the best champion to punch up. He's a champion that has to be ranked kind of like rank appropriate. Otherwise, you can kind of run out of your charges and lose a lot of your damage. And he takes a bit of a ramp up. So there is that. But ultimately, again, you can bypass his ramp up going up against mutants with prowess effects. And in general, I like what they did. That is, character how I would expect Iron Man to feel and look like. So good job on that, Kabam, for sure. And as I said, I would put him somewhere in the middle. Moving on to spot number 11. And that's Morbius. And it's no secret I have been less than stellarly reviewing Morbius. And I still genuinely feel that way. I do feel like Morbius right now is as popular as he is ever going to be because he's a tactic attacker. Last season and current season, Battlegrounds Kabam has been kind of like giving more leeway to the science champions. I do think there's plenty in his kit that can work very well. Obviously, if you can nuke something down to that level 2, he can finish fights very, very fast. The glide mechanic is quite cool and exciting to use. I like that quite a bit. And he is a complete opposite of Werewolf by Night. Werewolf by Night was a Mystic champion that got released in a time when Science champions are being supercharged and the poor doggo is getting beat up. Morbius is a Science champion that kind of like, works with all of the offensive tactics and all of the offensive nodes. Therefore, he can perform better than he normally would as well. Ultimately, I do think he falls somewhere in the middle. I perhaps do expect him to fall back slightly as the time goes by, because even right now, even with the science tactic nodes working in Battlegrounds, for instance, you already can immediately see fair few less people running Morbius, even if they took him to rank 2, because he doesn't match up that great with many other champions. As in, like, the more important fights, like, your Korgs and your whatnots, he doesn't tend to do well, and that is one of the most important things for like Battlegrounds and Alliance War and the usage of these champions is how many of the meaningful hard fights your attacker can do. And he just doesn't have the best score. He really doesn't. At the same time, whenever he works, he can be phenomenal. The problem with him ultimately is if you do not kill your opponent with a level 2, it takes quite a long time to kind of like get back at it. And that is often the case with these champions that build up to like a massive special attack. Could be something similar to the case of, Mantis, but a bit less so because Mantis has better, base damage. Morbius base damage is quite abysmal, so he actually has a really, really bad case of that. But the point is, if the level, it's kind of like Shocker. If your heavy attack, charge, and ramp up doesn't kill the opponent, you're probably going to spend significant amount of time trying to finish off the last 15% of the opponent. Therefore, again, he is the type of champion where higher rank does help a lot, but that still doesn't solve the matchup problems. And at the same time, he does suffer from below average health pool, for sure. Very, very poor crit damage and crit rate, and no attack modifiers in his base kit, which ultimately, again, it's a level 2 or a bust type of champion, and that form will pretty much always have its limitations whenever there is special attack usage being impeded. And that's not to mention the fact that he is reliant on opponents not being immune to bleed or not shrugging off the debuffs, as many science champions would be. You can bypass that with his awakened ability, but again, it's not that easy to be acquired on 7 stars as of right now. It's going to be interesting to see how he does in the future. Obviously, I always want all the champions to do the best they can, but I do suspect that Morbius has some challenges ahead of him to stay relevant. Spot number 10, I'm giving it to Maestro. And Maestro, the best way to describe Maestro, honestly, is he's kind of like what Kindred should have been, in a sense. Because his kit is clearly defensive. There is some, hard to avoid damage in his kit. And, he's not the offensive powerhouse. But, He's newer, so we have to keep that in mind, because obviously we're going to find more and more and better counters to him. He's also currently enjoying the fact that not a lot of mystic characters are being used due to the dominance of science champions. And those are all things kind of going against him. But the things going for him is that his damage is at the very least acceptable enough for him to be used on offense. And additionally, his health pool is significantly chunkier. He is one of the chunkier champions in the game, together combined with the glancing and everything else. Even if you have a counter against Maestro, often enough he will at the very least stall and delay champions for him to stay relevant in the battlegrounds fight. It's kind of the same thing. It's not a hard thing to fight Hercules on defense, but he does a great job as defender just by stalling them out and letting you nuke something else. And I kind of feel like that could be very, very similar situation with Maestro in many matchups as well. Additionally, Maestro is currently enjoying the benefits of the fact that Cosmic 7-star rosters on average are very, very weak. There aren't that many great Cosmic 7-stars released in the game, and most of the people, if they pull this Cosmic rank up gem, they don't really have great targets. Therefore, he gets the kind of like early bird special on the rank up gem, and therefore we see more bigger versions of him. Therefore, people are relying and using him more than, if he was a science champion, we'd see a lot less of him. If he was a mystic champion, we'd see less of him. If he was, mutant or some other class champion, we would see less of him. He definitely is currently benefiting from the fact that for many, many people, you just don't have so many great science rank up options. And offensively, again, this is kind of like the infuriating bit comparing him to the Kindred, because his offensive kit is non-existent. He basically has nothing except slightly better damage. His damage is still average at best or slightly below average, but it's at the very least acceptable and possible to a point where if you need just a champion that can function like as a cosmic beatstick, he will do the job. There is no real offensive utility, unlike Kindred, for instance. But Kindred's damage is so abysmal that, you just never really want to use him offensively. Like, a great example is that Kindred, ironically, is considered to be a good counter, and ability-wise, he's almost a perfect counter to Maestro. But he still takes like 90 seconds on equal ranks, so that sucks, and, that's still an L typically. And that's not quite the case with Maestro, for instance. He can, take down champs in like 60 seconds in kind of like a free circumstance meta. So there goes that. The one positive thing for him to be used offensively, but it's actually serving more defensive purpose as well, is the fact that he does have 3 immunities. He's immune to Poison, Shock, and Incinerate, and obviously that can have offensive uses to go up against nodes or some champion abilities. But again, these immunities, they're both offensive and defensive abilities, because you do stop champions that do rely on Bleed, Shock, or Incinerate going up against him. And that's, about his end of his offensive utility. Still, a champion that is currently very present in the game, that is a problem that I need to make a video on how to defeat the guy as well, because a lot of people are asking, because again, he's doing his job. So putting him at spot number 10, definitely will be curious to see what happens with him later on. But let's move on spot number 9, and that's Lady Deathstrike. Lady Deathstrike is kind of one of the most unique champions in the game, in a sense, if not the most unique champion, because her attack modifiers hardly matter. Bulk of her damage comes from Ruptures, and that is tied to her armor rating. Now, that is a double-edged sword, because that supercharges the lower rarities of Lady Deathstrike, and the 3-star can, outperform 5 stars, especially longer form content. That does also potentially hurt her in some of the metas, and offensively as a 6 or a 7-star champion, because she can't ever properly benefit from attack modifier nodes, and they are quite present and current in the game. At the same time, I do personally think that she currently is one of the more slandered, in a sense, champions, or slept on, or disrespected, because she does have a lot going on for her. But I think the way she was presented, perhaps, or the way the idea caught on in the community, that she has like a hard playstyle where you can't block, it's quite garbage, to be honest, because with her, you can pretty much play like a very, very basic champion. Like, honestly, using Lady Deathstrike, you can use her just like Maestro. Just do your 5-hit combos, Because as you are ramping up, you don't need to worry about not being able to block at all whatsoever. And once you do enter your ferocity, you still have your 2-3 parries that are allocated for you. And even if you parry more, nothing crazy happens. You still deal, acceptable amounts of damage to close out that fight. But in between, the ability to just, do a combo, throw a level 1, and then parry and do a combo, and go into striker, and then do a level 1, and then getting your openings by punching opponents level 1s, you don't have, that problem with, oh my god, I can't parry, I need to like get in an intercept or something. And ultimately, she is a very, very solid tech champion because she can protect you from a ton of mistakes. You can eat special attacks to the face with her, regioning back all the damage she takes and more in many cases. I have actually used that as a legitimate tactic for healing up at times. And she's kind of super simple, super stable champion to play. Obviously, she does benefit quite decently from being awakened, but at the current levels, even if you have an unawakened Lady Deathstrike, I still think she's a wonderful rank up option because she can, catch people in defense quite easily because of number 1, her animations, number 2, her ability to go unstoppable when opponents throw special attacks, and offensively, she actually matches up very well and much better than people think she would in tons of matchups. Obviously, she has very solid access to heal block as well, tons of damage over time effects. And yeah, honestly, I do hope that, once she becomes more available as a 7-star, people actually start ranking and using her up more because she is significantly better than a lot of people think she is. Move on. Spot number 8. And I think this is kind of like the cutoff for the champions that, a lot of people really, really love. And Adam Warlock is one of them. And again, I'll be flat out and completely honest. Adam Warlock is not a champion from me. I was very hyped, very excited when he got released. And after using him, I quite quickly realized that, you need to make a lot of kind of like split-second decisions with Adam due to the nature of, his playstyle. You having to land a hit in order to refresh your buffs, and you having to kind of rely on opponents throwing the special attacks, or if they don't throw, you at times need to go for like a risky intercept or, quickly enter your pod. And I think he was kind of like a slightly missed opportunity for very reasonable rebalancing because there are tons of things that I absolutely like and love about him. The fact that he can spend most of the fight unblockable is awesome. The fact that he has, regeneration to mitigate his chip damage, great. Access to immunities, like Incinerate, Shock, and Cult immunity. That's a great set of immunities to have. On top of it all, like obviously immunities to nullify from opponents' abilities. This is again one of those things which kind of starts to frustrate me though, because it's not like a proper nullify immunity. It's against champions, so basically, you're always gonna need to follow up and think whether it's active or not, whether it counters, the particular situation or not. But ultimately, I think he's a solid champion. I think there is a lot to be gained if you get very comfortable using this champion because, if the fight goes well for him, he's crazy good. He really is. He's also a better defender than a lot of people think or expect him to be. His biggest kind of like downside on defense is, again, very small health pool and the fact that there is a buff fiesta, so plenty of Mystic Champions will completely nuke him. But on the flip side, he's going to be spamming specials. He's going to be stalling you by entering his pod and triggering his regenerations. He can catch you as well if you do accidentally hit him when he does trigger his pod. And he's kind of hard to parry and all those things. Ultimately, though, I think one of the worst things for Adam is the current situation with AI. And don't get me wrong, it hurts a lot of champions. But it's kind of like especially exaggerated for Adam because, half the time you can counter or infuriate the opponent and they're going to go defensive. You can put intimidate an opponent when they should be putting up their block and they won't be. So it's a fairly tricky thing to manage. And I think it's an end result in Kabam's inability to actually sort out their AI properly. Adam's nowhere near as popular as he could have been if Kabam actually had fixed the AI. And that's where he's at the moment. There are people who really, really like him. And I get that because he can be very cool. And there are people who, just like me, say it's not for me, at the very least, not currently. If the AI behaved better and more reliably, perhaps I would enjoy Adam more. And same time, he's one of those champions where the fight will either go amazing or it is going to tumble down and be quite annoying and frustrating, and it can go downhill quite fast. And that is not the type of champion that I like to focus on personally. You know, it's very cool to do these fights when there are no stakes, when it's not Alliance War, when it's not Polygons, for instance. But when there are, you know, some consequences to screwing up and dying and stuff like that, these are the type of champions I personally prefer to avoid. And Adam kind of fits in that category. I hoped Kabam would have tuned him slightly to make him more kind of like consistent, but that didn't happen. And I can see an argument as to why. But, you know, it just means that not very likely that I'm personally going to be, you know, enjoying Adam a lot. Move on, spot number 7, and that will be Kushala. Now, Kushala is a bit harder to rate because she's very, very, very new to the game, right? She only came in the game last month. And she looks good. She has very little defensive utility, but she is kind of like an offensive nuke version of Dr. Voodoo in a sense. And there is plenty going on for her. Ultimately, how successful she is going to be will depend how well she matches up with the most meaningful defenders. And, you know, so far she does a fairly good job for the most part. I like that. I like the fact that, you know, she doesn't have reliability on the buffs, that she interacts with Mystic Dispersion a bit differently. The fact that she is a fast-paced, kind of like fast Mystic champion, which I have been saying for quite a long time. Much less so, you know, right now, because we do have some faster Mystic champions, but there are not too many of Mystic nuke type of characters still in the game. And it's glad to see another one joining. At the same time, I'm going to be brutally honest here, and it could be because of less experience. It could be because of the fact that she's newer. I like her, but when it comes to DLL champions, I like her the least of them all. I do think she's good. I don't think she's Photon, Kate, or Absman good. Which is fine, but that's just the reality. And if I'm being 100% honest, spot number 7 also is kind of like giving her the benefit of the doubt because of the track record of DLL, because of, you know, seeing the potential there. Do I think she has proved it all the way? Do I think she will, you know, she has showed that she really is up there? Not really, not yet, but, you know, I think that she will. I believe that she will. There are, again, cool things. The fact that she's one of the very, very, very few champions with access to Soul Barb, which is becoming more important, I think will play a relevance. I think she has very powerful nullifiers in level 1, and I think that is going to be important too. And obviously, you know, the rest of her abilities still reducing opponent's ability power rate can be useful. That's especially combined with the ability power rate, with the nullification on level 1. And her increased ability accuracy, the fact that she has energy attacks, so she can do some random matchups like Korg, for instance, and so forth. There is a lot of good things in her kit. It's just that, you know, very hard to have an accurate assessment of her as she's fairly new to the game. Let's move on to the next one. And honestly, spots number 6 and 5, I had swapped them around. And I actually had put Cassie one spot higher. And I'm just going to say who's going to be number 5, that's Silk. I think spot 6 and 5 are Cassie and Silk. I think they are very, 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 very close to their evaluation. And there's like very comparable level of power that both of them kind of get by going about it in completely different ways. Now with Cassie, obviously she's a bit slower at the start than Silk is, but Cassie punches up much better than Silk does. One of the things that people don't realize is for Silk to do well, she has to be ranked to the max. Silk doesn't punch up well at all compared to Cassie, especially with Cassie, you know, when the fights kind of like can go a bit longer, that's especially obvious in like Alliance War fights where you perhaps take not less than ideal matchup or go up against 7-star rank 3 mini boss or something. You always feel very safe, very stable, and you know for a fact that, you know, you just keep playing and your damage, once you kind of like ramp up, is going to be there and you're going to get the job done. She's also much faster than people realize. Like, you can legitimately do Balgon's, you know, monster defender fights like Sasquatches and Winters and stuff like that in under 60 seconds with her, which is, you know, perfectly great speed for a science champion of equal rank fighting. Or even, you know, punching upwards slightly. And she does punch upwards better than Silk does. And I also think that ultimately she's safer with how chunky he is, with the taunt and inequity and the taunt from the relic put on everything else. She, you know, makes opponent hardly do any damage to you when you do make that mistake. Most of her whipping issues have been fixed. She has full-on buff immunity, which has been superbly useful recently. And she's by far my Alliance War MVP for the past 2 seasons. Did the most fights with her. Basically, you know, even if I played poorly, she kind of pulled me through it. I've been using a ton of her in Battlegrounds as well. She can be a decent defender, definitely better than Silk. So why not put her above? Why did I pull her down? Well, the truth of the matter at the moment is because she doesn't exist as a 7-star, and everybody's looking at the shiny eyes on the 7-stars right now and naturally investing and playing them more than the 6-stars, and people are much more hesitant in ranking up and using 6-stars. And we are at a time when, you know, that alone will make champions kind of fall out of favorability sooner rather than later. And when effectively, you know, I think I value both champions very, very, very similarly. I think that will be the deciding factor for the community, which one of those champions is going to be more popular, meta relevant, and more present. Because every single one of the top tier players and every single one of the players at large who are kind of like progressing the ladder and likely watching these videos, you know, will be hunting the 7-stars and preferring to rank up the 7-stars. So if you're going to have a 7-star Silk and if you're going to have a 6-star Cassie, probably going to go with 7-star Silk. That's the reality of it. At the same time, I personally like her a lot. I use her a lot. I think she's great. I think, you know, not everybody in community necessarily still has had a chance to appreciate her because she is a bit tricky to play. There are things that you need to know. She, you know, can be similar to Tiger in a sense where you need to know when you can punish opponents' special attacks with a heavy, when you can start charging it, except there's additional level of difficulty because you have to consistently keep an eye on your pin particles. But at the same time, everything she does very well. It feels, you know, very good to use her. And yeah, she's been absolutely phenomenal. So good job on whoever designed Cassie. Just wish she didn't have all the whiff problems at the beginning. So I already revealed spot number 6. Sorry, so these are spots number 7 and 6. So that would be no, it's spots number 6 and 5. My bad. That would be Silk, and Silk's doing well. There's not too much to add. I think, you know, she's performing great. The best thing about Silk that I can definitely tell is the fact that she somehow, one way or another, escaped the spider curse. This is actually like a very, very interesting thing to show to people. I don't think a lot of people realize just how squishy all the spider characters are. So if we go to HP at, let's say, 6-star rank 5 level, you can see that virtually all of the spider characters are some of the squishiest champions in the game. And that has been one of my personal gripes with having that many spider characters in the game to begin with. You can see that all of them have like very, very small health pool. And somehow, if you take a look at the science class per health pool, you can see again Spider-Man at the bottom. But we can see that Silk's actually like one of the chunkiest science champions. You know, there aren't that many chunkier science champions. And I think that has great implications for Silk. Silk has bigger health pool than Abomination, Immortal Abomination, and Hulk. So, for what it's worth. I think that matters a lot. And makes her, feel more safe to use in addition to that evade. That evade is amazing because it opens up Silk to be much more aggressive than she otherwise would or could be. And that has a special alert to these, very fast-paced players who want to be hyper-aggressive and who often do risk these intercepts when opponents have a bar of power. And in case with Silk, it's completely and perfectly safe. Most of her actual utility kind of comes from that evade and the awakened ability. That is kind of a bit of a downside for her. But when it comes to damage in itself, she has plenty of it, and she can be a very fast science champion for sure. Again, if you're willing and able to play aggressively, number one, and number two, if you have her ranked up appropriately. That is, again, quite an important thing for the character. I have personally come to realize that, if there's a 7-star rank 2, rank 3 Silk, I'm going to be wary. If, for instance, it's a 6-star rank 5 Silk, at this point in Battlegrounds, I'm not going to worry about it too much because she's not necessarily as fast as people make her out to be if she has to punch upwards. That's kind of an interesting group of champions that behave that way. And she's one of those because she relies on this build-up of her physical vulnerabilities and then having a massive kind of payout at the level 2. And if that goes away, and if you have detonated, and if you have lost your physical vulnerabilities, you go back to very modest damage output, and it will take a while to get back to it, to get the relic back sorted, and so on and so forth. At the same time, definitely a successful addition to the game. Definitely many people's favorite as well. It will be interesting to see how she performs going forward. Again, one of those champions, kind of similar to Morbius in a sense. I do expect her to have some challenges to maintain her place. At the same time, though, I do, like the champion. I do hope she does well. And we're just going to have to wait and see. All right, let's get in top 4. And top 4 is, again, class above. If I said at top 8, every single one of the top 8 characters is going to be somebody's favorite champion, then at the top 4, every single one of the champions mentioned in the top 4 is going to be somebody's best champion of the year. I do think that, again, there's a gap in quality. And at spot number 4, I am putting in Future Ant-Man. And Future Ant-Man, after his bug fix, with his glancing abilities enabled, is on top of being a very solid and reliable attacker with some of my personal favorite power control abilities in the game. He's also really rough on defense, especially in metas where cosmic champions can be kind of limited or stopped slightly. Because he can be very, very, very frustrating. His specials are hard to punish, not super easy to dex fully, and some of the abilities activate through block. Glancing can mess with you a ton, and you can't hit too hard at him because he's going to be regenning plenty of the damage back. And yeah, he's rough. At this point in Battlegrounds currently, for instance, I'm just banning all the Sandy Future Ant-Man. That's how annoying he can be. He's quite rough to fight, and we do need to respect that. And then offensively, what I like most about him, he kind of covers some of the matchups that Nimrod doesn't very well. As in, he's great against Havoc, for instance, because it's direct damage. It's not energy damage. He has the armor ups. You have the power control. He does that fight exceedingly well. Similar to Bishop. Destroys Bishop. Great. Again, obviously, there will be matchups where Nimrod is going to be significantly faster than Future Ant-Man is. But in between, his glancing abilities, his power control, I feel like he has a place in this game going forward, and important place answering significant and tricky fights. Because again, when you play Future Ant-Man, as I showed in one of my kind of intro guide videos, one of my personal favorite things about Future Ant-Man is the fact that you can effectively spend the entire fight without ever allowing opponent to throw a special attack and still do, meaningful amounts of damage. And that's huge. There aren't many champions who can do that in a fight. at all whatsoever. Obviously, there are limitations in using him. There are situations where, he's less than ideal, as with any other champion. And when looking at the way he matches up, and honestly, he's not, out of all top 3, out of all top 4 champions, I would say that overall he has least amount of matchups that he's convincingly good at. Because there will often be some type of, fights or abilities that can kind of like mess with him and, make him slower or maybe less than suited. Another thing that Future Ant-Man can struggle with at the times, especially right now, is for whatever reason, have been really hating on buffs recently. And obviously, Future Ant-Man gets a lot of them. Yes, when they are nullified, you get a passive one, which is awesome, which is better than many other champions would. But at the same time, just carrying like 10 buffs around or needing to get to those 10 buffs, currently in the game, it's really not a good thing. It typically often does end up punishing you because we have so many nodes that pilfer, nullify, or, trigger some sort of annoying abilities when you are gaining these buffs. And that currently is a thing as well. Ultimately, though, I think he is awesome. There are legitimate arguments currently being made for him being a top tech champion. And, that's a legitimate conversation. I still haven't decided exactly where he's going to land in tech top 3, but I can tell you in advance that he will be in the top 3 tech champions in the game, period. And that is already a very, very big kind of qualifier and praise. In fact, every single one of the champions in the 2023 top 4 video will end up at, close to the top of their respective classes. Right. So who's better than Future Ant-Man? And spot number 3 goes to Absorbing Man. Absorbing Man is just a utility machine. Again, legitimate argument for him being the best champion of the year. I fully accept that. I do think that there will be people who claim him as the best champion of the year. And rightfully so. He's a solid defender. He was far more scarier when he came out. Now people obviously have learned to fight him much, much, much better. So his defensive value has, shrunk drastically. Let's just, address that as a fact. He's definitely nowhere near as scary as defender as he once was. And not necessarily just because science class has been dominating. Just because people learned how to fight him much, 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 much better. And that is something that you could do opposed to, let's say, Future Ant-Man. Against Future Ant-Man, if you don't have a decent matchup, you're going to be screwed. So defensively, Future Ant-Man is definitely, in my opinion, better than Abs is. But Abs still has, plenty of oomph in defense, especially if there are some nodes helping him out also. But, the real value of Abs lies in his versatility. Abs is ridiculously versatile when it comes to how many fights he can do. When it comes to his damage output, overall, it's not his strongest suit. His damage output is amazing if there are some external factors helping him. There are opponents that have buffs that expire. If there's an armor break involved, if he can trigger his immunities frequently, then his damage output goes significantly higher and the difficulty of using him also gets reduced. At the same time, in like base conditions, if there's nothing helping him out in the fight, he's still solid. He's not going to be the fastest attacker, but he's not a slouch by any means. And again, the coolest thing about him is the ridiculous amount of fights he does. In between having million immunities and in between having like insane resistances that effectively make you immune to a whole other set of stuff, in between having regen, in between not relying on debuffs to do damage or buffs to do damage, the man puts in work. We have seen him, in Alliance Wars, on attack, on defense. We have seen him in Necropolis. We have seen him in Battlegrounds. We see him everywhere, and there's a very, very good reason for it, and that is the vast application use that he has. There are many, many things that he can do. A lot of the things that people have completely forgotten about, for instance, before Necropolis came out, people completely forgot that he can reduce opponents' power gain by like 60%, stealing their power. I don't even remember where the build exactly is written, but it is there. I definitely know for a fact that it is there. where, again, blocking a hit reduces opponent's ability power rate by 72% until Absorbing Man stops blocking. The power denied is transferred to Absorbing Man. That's also very, very powerful and, super helpful when you need to deal with like Vision Arcus or Airwalker in Necropolis. A lot of people didn't even know he had it because there's so much else going on with him. And also, a cool thing is that addition of Absorbing Man has made the game better. Has made the players better. Because before Absorbing Man came to the game, very, very, very few players were comfortable or even remotely, able to light intercept semi-reliably. And now, purely because of Absorbing Man, the amount of players who do that on a regular basis has increased. And that means that the release of this champion has single-handedly increased the overall skill level of the players, which is something we need to give props to the champion as well. Let's move on. Spot number 2. What's better than a champion that made everyone else better? Well, it's Kate. And let's talk about Kate, because Kate's running it high. Kate's enjoying life right now. Kate works everywhere. She's becoming a fan favorite. Again, there are plenty of conversations, just like with Absorbing Man, just like with Fam, also with Kate currently being the best skill champion in the game. Again, I genuinely have not yet at this very moment decided whether she will or will not get that spot, but she will be top 3. And very much so deservedly, because, again, a successful champion edition by DLL, and she puts in work in Necropolis, Alliance work, Battlegrounds, everywhere else, questing and stuff, Grandmaster's Gauntlet. She has like some of the best matchups there. And the reason why she does so is because she just kind of checks all the offensive boxes that you would expect the character. She's plenty fast. She is even better in long form fights. She has a fairly unique offensive, ability. She doesn't deliver her damage through brute force, thus being subjected to damage caps or alike abilities. She delivers it through a rare form of damage over time effect that not too many champions are immune to. She has alternatives to that because, believe it or not, Caltrops can actually do significant amounts of damage as well. There is additional great reliable bits of utility in her kit, like Tranquilize, if you are willing to sacrifice some of your damage at the very least at the start. She can bypass Evade with her Cold Snap, and she can bypass Miss with her Tracking debuff. She has access to passive stun. She can deliver large amount of damage in a fight once set up as well, with hardly touching the opponent by just pausing her Cold Snaps hitting the opponent's block. And there's not much to add. At the moment, Kate is putting in work virtually everywhere. And strictly offensively speaking, it just because these champion lists are primarily looking at offense, but defense and overall impact on the game matters too. But if we're speaking strictly offensively, I would call her the best offensive champion of the year. Because unlike Future Ant-Man, unlike Abs, unlike the champion that I'm putting in spot number 1, she has 0 defensive value, and yet she's this high on the list. That, tells you that she is incredibly, incredibly powerful offensively. And again, there's no really getting around it. She is probably the cheapest Necropolis option. She's one of the best Grandmaster Gauntlet options. She's one of the more popular Battlegrounds options. She's one of the most popular Ascension target options. She's solid in Alliance War Attack. Not as used in Alliance War Attack, I'd say, as dominant everywhere else, but still functions and plays there too. Some other cool things with her is she interacts extremely well with attack modifiers, which is often super helpful kind of like thing that makes champions exceptional in specific circumstances, and she is. That's Kate. So what's better than Kate? What's the best champion of the year in my opinion? And that's Photon. And I understand that Photon is still up for balance update, and as of the recording of this video, I do not know whether she will or will not get tuned. But, I can't let that, affect a current ranking, a current situation in the game. But it is an important disclaimer. She is still up for balance update, and she might get tuned down, and, but the same goes for plenty of other champions like Kushala and whatnot that's released recently. So, Photon. Why is Photon the best? Because overall, I think undoubtedly Photon has had the biggest impact on the game thus far. She's the champion that exists as a 7-star, but people are rushing to rank up the 6-star. And that's unique, and there's a reason for it. And the reason for it is because in the most competitive game modes, Alliance War and Battlegrounds, where, who you use or whether you don't die and stuff like that matters the most. She's borderline an auto win in a round. Unless opponent drafts like a perfect counter for her, you're just going to lose. She's plenty tanky, which is off your willpower, so any chip damage you take against her will be felt. She basically requires very specific counters. If there's any nodes making the fights more difficult, the fight becomes borderline unmanageable, especially if she's awakened in high sig. And she is effectively equivalent, if not worse, than fighting Domino, but except if there are far fewer counters. Because even with good counters, it's quite easy to screw up against her because you can't parry her really. Any chip damage you take, you can't really get, that region back, or it's much harder to do so anyways. She automatically invalidates any, recall master user if they don't have the immunities. So we all know how nasty Domino is on defense. And Photon is very similar to Domino on defense in terms of nastiness, except that there are far fewer amazing counters to her, and even the good counters to her, it's much easier to mess up with them. Like, even if you bring in like Kingpin or something, half the time you're still gonna get, smacked in the face plenty of times, or, it's not going to go great. We don't have many counters to her in game at the moment, period. Defensively, she is not only, I suspect, the most successful defender right now, she's also the one that requires very high skill cap to do well. Obviously, as time passes, people will learn how to fight against Photon better and better. But here's the trick. She's still going to demand fight time because you will often need to kind of like wait out her charges and whatnot. And she's very rough. So defensively, at the moment, she's definitely the best defender we have right now in any kind of like competitive aspect. For sure. That alone would not put her up top, though. What does is that she's offensively as good as any. Like, she might not be the best offensive science character. She's not better than Human Torch offensively. She's not better than Kate Bishop offensively for skill champion. Or she's not better than Scorpion offensively. She isn't. But she's not far off. She's very, very, very capable. On equivalent levels, she can do like the chunkiest of the Mystic defenders, like Rintras and Sasquatches, in like 60 seconds or so, which again is approximately the speed Cassies and Silks would do it as well, with the difference that she's much tankier herself because of her interaction with Inequity, because of her massive block, massive energy resist, and obviously she has built-in fail-safes as well, to a point where, if you get accidentally parried, which happens more often now, opponent is just going to ramp you up effectively. Her health pool, again, is fairly large and solid. All of her stats really are relatively high, like crit rate, for instance. We can see that the crit rate is at 76 percentile. That's very, very high. And yeah, I mean, like, she's just bonkers, does a lot of fights very well on attack. He's currently the most powerful defender in the game. And I don't think I'd be willing to, like change this ranking at this time in the game. Because she's busted. She really is. She's crazy, crazy, crazy good. And again, I'm gonna finish talking about Photon just the way I started. She's pretty much the only champion in the game at the moment where, even though she exists and is available as a 7-star, most of the endgame players still chasing the 6-star, immediately maxing her out and immediately ascending her. And that's very significant, because that speaks volumes of the overall significance of the champion currently in the game. And I would feel wrong putting Photon anywhere else but in top spot 2020. Right. Those have not been my thoughts and my opinions. Remember, I'm still being taken hostage by an crazed mob of Vision fans who have found my resting location in Latvia. They, clearly expended a lot of effort with some international travel and tracking me down. But hey, being held hostage, nothing I said in this video can get traced back to me, is not an opinion of my own. I denounce everything that I just said, and Danny Moonstar is the best champion of the year. Right, I'm gonna catch you guys later. Oh wait, I need to show you guys the final rankings for those of you. I know you. It's like, I know you. There's a whole bunch of you who just skip to the front, check the list, go to comment section and talk shit. I know you. We all know you. I mean, like, we all know that. There's plenty of you. I'll be seeing you in comment section. Bye-bye. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information